Hey guys, I am recording this video to give you a little bit of an update of what's going on in the Triangle real estate, what's going on with MLS. There's a lot of weirdness happening right now. The big ones are that basically the buyer agency field, compensation field got removed on the MLS yesterday. And of course, the whole idea was increase transparency with people, but it's actually kind of limited it, because now what's going to happen is when we want to go see a house, this is my best recommendation, okay? What we need to do, what I want you to do is email Mary at shenrealestate.com, ask for the documents, we'll review them together. I always like to do that first anyway. That's not a change, but I like to do that first because, you know, if there's something in the RPD that says like the foundation needs $50,000 worth of work and you're not up for that, then let's just like save our energy and not go see that place. Okay, but the other thing that we're gonna need to get is a 220. It's called Form 220. It's a confirmation of compensation. And the reason why is this: what it'll have on there is whether or not the seller is paying a buyer's agent or not, and then how much they're paying. So we already have an agreement in place of what I will be paid at closing for my time and for my work, for everything. And just as a refresher, the way this works is that, I get paid at closing. And if the seller is not offering compensation, then you're going to pay it. Now, most buyers don't want to pay for a buyer's agent. You know, like it's typically been sellers that have paid, and now we're in this world where are all sellers going to offer compensation? I don't know. We're going to find out. I think a whole bunch of them will. I've already heard from specific firms that they're creating even firm policy where they're just not going to take any listings without paying a buyer's agent. It's just smart because, you know, the way that this came about was back before the 90s, buyer's agents didn't even exist. So when you would list a house, you would charge your seller anywhere from 6 to 7%. Commission was actually higher back then. And then the list agent would either like drum up a buyer and, you know, get paid that full 6 to 7%, or another agent would bring them a buyer and then they would split the commission, right? Except that, guess what? Technically, buyer agency didn't even exist. And so both of the agents technically represented the seller, which is not great, for the buy side, because you shouldn't be in that position. You need somebody trying to advocate for you and saving you money. And that's not what was happening. So then they created buyer agency in the 90s to make sure that consumers were protected. And it's since, by the way, it's still completely legal for me, like, for example, when I have a listing, to bring a buyer to it and represent both sides and get paid that full amount. It's completely legal for me to do that. I don't represent both sides because that's an obvious ethical conflict, and I don't like that. And so you're much better off. Everybody is, the agents and you and the seller are better off when you have two agents on both sides. Okay. You're also better off having an agent. And I just filmed something else about this, but essentially it is, there's different reasons why it's hard to get under contract as an unrepresented buyer. But also people have this conception that you're going to save basically paying a buyer's agent when you do this. The problem with that conception is that it's based on the premise that the list agent will work for free. And most people I know just don't have the time or the energy or the desire to work for free, no matter what industry you're in. So that doesn't tend to work out. What happens is when you sign a listing agreement, the seller and their list agent, 9 times out of 10, they have an agreement in place for what are we going to do if an unrepresented buyer wants to make an offer. Well, the list agent may not represent them. This is what I do on my listings. I'd say in no uncertain terms will I ever represent a buyer on my listings because of the obvious ethical conflict there. But I can do X, Y, and Z to do the work to get this to closing that a buyer agent would be doing. You can't advise and other things like that, but there's a lot of work that is still done to get it to closing, and typically that's a totally other job. And so, you know, I'm still getting paid for that work because, again, I'm not gonna do work for free. I just can't. Like, my family would rather see me, and I would rather see them than do work for free. So that's what unrepresented buyers don't really understand in this new world, is I think they're thinking, hey, I'll just make an offer and then deduct like 2.5% from my offer because I don't have an agent. Well, they may show up to a listing and realize you're not going to save any money that way, and you will not be represented, which is not good. Better to get an agent. Okay, that was a rabbit hole. My bad. So when you want to go see a house, email Mary to get the documents. We will also get Mary to grab this form 220 so that we know exactly what the commission is on this place. Okay? So if we get the commission statement back and it says the seller will be paying 2.5%, great. We don't have any extra thinking to do. That's awesome. You don't have to come up with that 2.5% somewhere. If it comes back, and I'll give you 2 different scenarios. Well, probably only one's necessary. Let's just pretend it says 1% or whatever. Then obviously you're gonna go, well, can I come up with 1.5% to pay Shen at the end of this? If the answer is yes, then we will go see it and then see what we want to offer. And probably what we're going to offer is whatever seems fair and right to you minus 1.5%, right? Because we will work it into our offer. And if you are like, no, I don't want to deal with this nonsense, then we just won't go see the place. All right. So there may be, because this is the Wild West now and nobody knows what's going to happen in the next few weeks. There may be a scenario that comes up where the seller says, well, it all depends on the offer, whether I'm going to pay a buyer's agent or not. Now, I've already heard this being tossed around as a possibility. And just between us, this is like the dumbest thing I've ever heard. The reason why is because if you're like me and you go to the grocery store and you really want to buy this can of olives, but there's no price tag on it and you have no idea, is this can of olives $5 or is it $12? Which one is it? You know, because at $5, like, I'm interested, at $12, I'm not. Now, that is an exaggeration, but if you're like me at all in that regard, you want to know how much this house costs before you really get invested in thinking about purchasing it. You know, when I walk through a house with people, we do all kinds of valuations, right? And part of course, you know, hopefully the value to you as one of my buyers is that I can tell you a few things. I can tell you, how is this priced? When we compare it to comps, I can tell you what is a likely scenario for if you hang on to this place for 3 years, where might it end up price wise? And I can also tell you, yeah, you know, redoing the floors in here is probably going to be about $5,000. It's going to be this, it's going to be that. And so when we finally come up with making an offer, usually it's based on this whole kaleidoscope of factors, right? We've factored all of that in, you know, including your own personal desire and your financial resources, how much you want to spend, have to spend, all of that, and a host of factors, right? And so this is same as that, right? This is one more absolutely necessary factor that we need to have in understanding how much does this house cost? Because if you're looking at buying a house and it's going to cost $10,000 to refinish the floors because the floors are in awful shape and you've said, I cannot live with this, then you're obviously factoring that into the offer you're going to make. So I'm just telling you, I've heard this rumor floating around that some sellers may be saying, well, it depends on the offer you present. But that's sheer stupidity, because most people are going to need to know on the front end, no, you tell me if I'm paying X much more to a buyer's agent, and then I will come up with my offer, right? Yeah, I don't think that's going to work very well for sellers who do that. Because here's the issue. Here's what's kind of scary about that scenario. If we write an offer and I send it to the other side, you don't want to have second thoughts about that, because technically they can sign it and you're under contract. So if we really don't know what we're talking about, we're probably going to end up sending like a lower offer to cover our butt than to assume they're going to pay a buyer's agent. So really, that logic doesn't make any sense on the sell side. I hope this makes sense. Sorry, guys. But we may run into that scenario. We're going to just take every single, you know, house bit by bit, one by one. It's all going to be really case specific, and I will promise you that I will dig into the data. We're going to get really complex in our analysis, because I want to cover your butt as much as possible in all of this. So the upshot is just that we're going to get the confirmation of agency, so that we even know what we're looking at. If you know from the outset, yeah, the purchase price of this house plus 2.5%, like I'm good with whatever that is, then we don't have to wait around to get that confirmation. But it's crazy right now because we don't know how much stuff is. Okay. Anyway, please get in touch if you have any questions. This video was long enough, but I'm here for you. We're going to make it through.